Do you always put the needs of others first, even at the expense of your own needs? Are you often labelled as easygoing or adaptable? Do you hate conflict and do everything to avoid it? Do you suppress your own beliefs or values in order to blend in? Well, you might actually be fawning. Hi, I'm Phil, a late diagnosed autistic adult, and I'm here to help educate and dispel the myths about autism, particularly as it relates to older adults. Now today, as I record this, I just wanted to make a comment about what's going on outside. There's a bit of a storm brewing and it's very windy, and we live on top of a tall hill, so you might hear a bit of wind in the background of this recording. But anyway, let's dive into fawning. In a few of my recent podcasts, we have talked about shutdowns and meltdowns and how they relate to the body's response to danger. Today, I want to cover another key response, and that is fawning. As we've spoken about previously, when we sense danger in the environment, the amygdala, which is the region of the brain responsible for processing emotions, is triggered and initiates our response to that perceived threat. This response can take four main forms: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And we can see these same responses right across the animal kingdom. In the fight response, we turn and face the danger head on. Flight, we run away from the danger or predator, with the goal being to outrun it or at least outrun other prey. Freeze, we stay still in hopes that the predator focuses on other prey. This is akin to playing dead in the animal world. And finally, in the fawn response, we try to befriend the threat or predator to convince it that we are not a threat by being submissive. In the animal kingdom, this might look like an animal rolling on its back or cowering. As we have spoken about in autism, fight is akin to a meltdown or external response. Flight is literally running away or exiting the situation. And freeze is akin to a shutdown. So what is autistic fawning? Well, fawning is a modern-day survival instinct and can be related to trauma, particularly trauma around repeated events. This trauma can be as simple as our true autistic selves repeatedly not being accepted. Fawning is adapting to behaviour to avoid conflict, rejection or exclusion, or being submissive or trying to appease. It's not an intentional behaviour, more a reaction to the threat. It's about trying to reduce pain and suffering by being easygoing. The goal is to end conflict. For the autistic person, fawning is severely energy depleting and can lead to burnout or, over time, more complex health issues. It can also result in a loss of self-worth and even a loss of personal identity. It can affect relationships and in some cases lead to abuse. So what is the difference between masking and fawning? Masking is where we try to blend in with the actions and attitudes of other people around us. This might mean suppressing our authentic selves and may lead to suppressing stims. Stimming is where we use repetitive movements, sound or routines as a way to regulate our emotions or cope with sensory overload. By suppressing these stims in order to mask, the autistic person is at risk of tipping into sensory or emotional overload, or at the very least, fatigue. Like the best of Hollywood, autistic people dedicate their life to acting to maintain this mask in a performance worthy of an Oscar. So how is fawning different from masking? Whereas masking is like acting to blend in, fawning involves abandoning our own needs to meet the needs, wishes or demands of others. If we want to go into more detail about how the brain responds to the danger, there is a very interesting theory which creates a whole framework around this called Polyvagal theory. Developed by Dr. Stephen Porges, Polyvagal theory posits that the autonomic nervous system, governed by the vagus nerve, plays a vital role in how we respond to environmental stress and social cues. I won't jump into the full detail here, as there is quite a lot and enough to make a whole podcast to explain it more fully. But it does link quite strongly not only to the fight, flight, freeze response, but also to other autistic aspects like social engagement, communication and self-regulation. I'll try to come back to this in the future. But moving on, what are some of the key indicators of autistic fawning? Ignoring our own needs to make someone else happy. Over-friendliness to harmful people. May respond to criticism with compliments or apology. Have you done this where someone criticises and the first response is sorry, even if the criticism is unfounded? Difficulty in saying no. Maybe taking on work or helping someone else when you're already at your own limit. In relationships, this might look like difficulty in expressing personal needs or constantly putting other people's needs ahead of our own. Fear of conflict or confrontation. Being overly apologetic. Self-doubt and insecurity. Heightened sensitivity to criticism. In neurodivergence in general, this is often known as rejection sensitivity dysphoria, or RSD. Difficulty setting boundaries. This can also lead to the autistic person being taken advantage of. Imbalanced relationships where someone gives more than they receive. Or the autistic person may hide their true feelings or opinions. Fear of rejection, also an aspect of RSD. Ignoring our own beliefs or values to fit in. This one really hits home. In previous podcasts, we have talked about how autistic people are highly values-driven and strongly drawn to right over wrong. Fawning can mean we abandon those tightly held values and the desire for truth and right. I know at times I've done this, and the result is that it not only feels absolutely horrible, but induces more internalised trauma. An extension of this can lead to abusive relationships, where the autistic person fawns to please the other partner, which can lead to a complete imbalance of power and the loss of identity and agency for the autistic person. By agency, I mean the ability of the autistic person to maintain control over their own lives. Another version of this is what's called mate crimes, where the autistic person finds that they are taken advantage of by people around them and coerced into committing crimes on behalf of these people. Some criminals will seek out people who they can befriend and manipulate in order to coerce them into committing a crime for the criminal, taking the risk while the criminals stay back and leave the manipulated person to take the fall if it all goes wrong. An autistic person who fawns might be an ideal target for these individuals. Other key signs of autistic fawning might include a loss of our own identity, constantly trying to please other people, ignoring our own ideas or opinions and mirroring other people's ideas or opinions. Many autistic people may also experience alexithymia, which is an inability to easily identify our own emotions. This may mean in a situation where other people are experiencing emotion, we may copy those emotions as we might not easily be able to identify our own emotions in that moment. We might also wait to see how someone else reacts to a situation and copy their reaction, or imitate other people more generally. We might suppress our personal moral or ethical code when it is at odds with other people. Or conversely, we might always be on our best behaviour and try and stay out of trouble. This was me at school in particular. I was always trying my best not to step out of line and trying to do the right thing. So when I did mess up and got into trouble, I was traumatised. Another example of fawning might occur when something we really wanted does not happen. We often put out the message that it's okay, or it's no big deal, even though internally we might be gutted. In other words, when it is obvious we have missed out on something and other people might reasonably expect a disappointed response, we may actually appear unexpectedly fine. Okay, so what are some other key points and implications of fawning to an autistic person? When we fawn, other people see it as a positive, even though it hurts us. In other words, we come across as easygoing or a good person to be with. When an autistic person is fawning, they are more acceptable to neurotypical people. So this positive feedback encourages the autistic person to keep fawning. To a neurotypical person, a fawning autistic person looks like they are in a safe state because they appear to be fitting in. But the opposite is probably true in that the autistic person is probably in a state of trauma while fawning. Conversely, when an autistic person is actually in their safe state, That is when they appear to be dysregulated because as they are not fawning or masking, they are more likely to be stimming or just looking more autistic in general, which makes neurotypical people uncomfortable. So that is when they assume the autistic person is dysregulated or in trauma. This reversal of what each state looks like compared to the reality behind it leads to a feedback loop, creating more fawning and more trauma. When I started to look into this topic, I must admit my first response was, I don't really fawn, and I haven't really experienced any trauma to lead me to fawn. But I'll do the topic anyway, as it might help someone else. What I then realised by researching this is that yes, I fawn, even though I thought I didn't. This leads me to suspect other autistic people are fawning as a natural response to life in general, without any real understanding that this is what is happening, and the resultant cost internally. The consequence of this lack of awareness is an increased likelihood of burnout and stress in general. This stress is destructive and cumulative, and if left unchecked can lead to significant health implications. Now, I know this all too well. About 12 years ago, I went through a particularly stressful work period, which in looking into this topic, I realised also included a very unhealthy dose of masking and fawning, as well as extreme autistic overwhelm. The result of this overwhelm and stress, I believe, was to act as a catalyst to overload an artery in my brain, which had an undiagnosed congenital defect, causing a series of minor strokes, which then cascaded into a major stroke. Now, I won't go into the details of that in this podcast, as unpacking how my undiagnosed autism fully played into that event is a topic all of its own. But the short version is, I have a minor but significant and permanent vision impairment as a result. The reason for mentioning this here is to emphasise the point that actions like fawning or masking can have significant unforeseeable consequences to our health. For me, this extra stress and load on my body caused a system failure in a weak spot that I had no idea was even there. I'm sure all of us have a trigger point somewhere, so it's best not to find out in the way that I did. So how can you help the autistic person identify their own needs and advocate for themselves? Well, don't criticise them when they start to stim or act autistic. Help the autistic person identify their own emotions as distinct from other people who are around them. Be aware when the autistic person comes across as fine in a situation where an emotion might be expected and reasonable, that they might need help to identify and express that appropriately. Encourage them to set boundaries where needed. Or at least be aware of the energy being used in relation to the total energy that they might have available. Okay, so that's it for this very brief peek into autistic fawning. I hope this has been of some help in identifying fawning either in you or in your loved ones. If this has been of interest, please like, share or subscribe. And please feel free to add to the discussion in the comments section or make suggestions for future topics. As always, thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye for now.